Today, I'm talking about the BFG, written by Roald Dahl in 1982 and the 2016 adaptation directed by Stephen Speilberg. Hey there, I'm Jessica, and this is Bookshelf to Big Screen. I take a look at books that have been adapted to the big or small screen and tell you what changed. So if you only watched the movie and don't want to look like a fool at book club, be sure to subscribe. The story follows Sophie, an orphan who is kidnapped by a big friendly giant, the BFG. She learns that there are giants in the world and they eat people, but the BFG doesn't eat people. He actually gives them dreams. They become friends and work together to stop the bad giants and save the day. This is a great story about friendship, being brave, and doing the right thing. And the adaptation was wonderfully done, but had quite a few changes. So let's get into it. Both the book and the movie start out with Sophie catching sight of the giant in the middle of the night, and he kidnaps her because he's afraid to leave a witness. He carries her out of the city and far away to his cave. The BFG doesn't have the best grasp on English grammar, and after Sophie keeps correcting him, he gets a little down on himself. She apologizes after he tells her that he didn't go to school and had to learn a lot of things on his own. The BFG shows Sophie a green drink called Frobscottle, and they discuss how the bubbles go down instead of up, meaning they give you whizzpoppers or farts instead of making you burp. One small difference here that I'm not really going to count is that in the book, Sophie tries the drink too, but in the movie, they're interrupted by the flesh lump eater. Sophie comes up with a plan to stop the other giants from eating people. She tells the BFG they'll go to the Queen for help. First, they'll give the Queen a dream showing her that the giants are eating people, and then she'll dream about Sophie sitting on her windowsill with the BFG just outside. Then when the Queen wakes up, she'll see them really there and believe the dream. The BFG mixes up the dream and they put the plan into action. The Queen wakes up, sees Sophie, meets the BFG, and agrees to help. The BFG is invited in to have breakfast with the Queen. This might be my favorite and one of the silliest parts of the book and movie. I love that the movie kept so many details from the book, like him knocking into the chandelier, using clocks as legs for the BFG's table, using the grand piano as a seat, and needing a ladder to serve the BFG. In the movie, Sophie runs off a few drunk men before she hears the giant. This doesn't happen in the book, but it shows the kind of person that Sophie is right from the start. Later, when she hears a noise and goes back out, she sees the giant and he spots her right away. In the book, Sophie witnesses the giant giving one of her neighbors a dream before he spots and kidnaps her. Everything after the kidnapping is a little out of order than the way it was in the book. It doesn't really affect the story, but it is a big difference. Also, in the book, when Sophie first gets to the BFG's cave, they spend a lot more time talking. He tells her about all the different kinds of giants, what kind of people they like to eat, and about creatures and foods that are unknown to her. There's a bit where the BFG talks about what people from different countries taste like, and it's kind of stereotypical and could maybe be offensive, so it's probably a good idea they left all of that out. In the movie, the BFG tells Sophie he had to take her because she would have told someone and then people would be after him trying to lock him up. She argues, saying that she'd never tell anyone and begs for him to take her home. In the book, Sophie agrees that she would have probably told somebody about him and she understands his reasoning. In the movie, Sophie asks about a glowing bottle the BFG has. He tells her it's a dream. In the book, since she's already seen him giving a dream but doesn't really know what he was doing, she asks him about it. He's very suspicious of her, and it takes a little while for him to finally tell her that he's a dream-blowing giant. He explains how he collects dreams and goes out to give nice dreams to sleeping children. In the movie, Sophie tells the BFG that she's just going to escape, so he gives Sophie a nightmare, hoping she'll be afraid of giants and won't try to escape. In the book, the BFG doesn't give her a nightmare, but Sophie does say that she won't be there long because the other giants will find and eat her. In the movie, the flesh lump eater comes in, wanting the BFG to attend to his boo-boo. He smells Sophie and alludes to the fact that Sophie may not be the first human to have been in the BFG's cave. Sophie crawls into a snozzcumber to hide, but the BFG encourages the flesh lump eater to eat it, thinking it will distract him until he sees that Sophie is inside. He manages to dissuade the giant from eating it and gets him to leave. In the book, it's actually the blood bottler who comes in. The BFG doesn't see that Sophie has hidden in the snozzcumber, and the blood bottler actually takes a bite with her inside. Fortunately, he's so grossed out by the snozzcumber, he spits it out along with Sophie. Later in the story, the BFG tells Sophie that the flesh lump eater is the biggest and meanest giant, and he's the giant the BFG has a confrontation with at the end, so I think they just gave him this part in the movie to really solidify the fact that he's the worst. In the movie, after the flesh lump eater almost eats Sophie, the BFG helps Sophie get cleaned up and gives her some new clothes to wear. He's shocked to see her wearing a jacket. But this, paired with the flesh lump eater's comment, tells us that the BFG had another human friend at some point. Later in the movie, when Sophie accidentally drops her blanket in giant country, the BFG takes her back to the orphanage and finally confesses that there was a boy who saw him just like Sophie did. So he took him home with him, and the boy taught him to read. He says he could have brought him back, but then it was too late. And this is the reason he brought her back. He leaves her, but she puts him to the test, and he ends up taking her back home with him. The giants do come looking for Sophie, just like the BFG feared, and this is when Sophie finds the boy's room. None of this happens in the book. I know it probably adds drama to the story and adds depth to the BFG's character, and we get an exciting chase scene with the giants, but I feel like killing a kid in a kid's movie is just trauma that I didn't need. In the movie, Sophie has to beg the BFG to take her dream catching. After he finally agrees, they have to sneak past the other giants, but they wake up and catch him. Sophie manages to hide, but she gets caught up in the giants' game with the BFG anyway. To get to Dream Country, the BFG jumps into a lake portal thing and lands into an upside-down reflection world. Sophie is able to see all the dreams and chases them around, even catching one herself. In the book, Sophie is afraid to leave the cave because of the other giants, so she doesn't want to go dream catching. The BFG doesn't really give her a choice, and he just puts her in his pocket. They see the giants, who are not sleeping, on the way, and the giants toss the BFG around a little bit, but Sophie stays in his pocket the whole time. Afterwards, the BFG tells her all about the other giants. When Sophie asks how no one is noticing all the people missing, the BFG reminds her that people go missing all the time, but at the hands of humans. He points out that humans are the only creatures killing their own kind, and that giants are basically only eating people because they're essentially at the top of the food chain. I'm a little disappointed that this is not in the movie because it's a really thought-provoking moment for Sophie. Finally, when they're crossing into Dream Country, they just get there after the BFG runs at top speed for a while. There's no magic lake or anything like that. Also, the dreams are invisible until they're caught, and Sophie has to stand very still and quietly so the BFG can hear the dreams. I can appreciate this change in the movie because the movie version looks cool and magical, and I think visually the book version would have been a bit boring. In the movie, the BFG finally gives Sophie his name once they get to Dream Country, and then he asks for hers. In the book, this exchange happens at the beginning when they first get to the cave and start talking. I think this change is kind of weird because naturally we expect an introduction immediately, but my guess is that this change in the movie is due to the BFG guarding himself and not wanting to get too close after losing his other friend. In the movie, after the dream catching, the BFG takes Sophie with him to give people dreams. Sophie asks if his parents taught him about dreams, and he tells her that giants don't have parents, and that he's probably as old as the earth. The BFG describes a boy's dream to Sophie, and then they go back home. In the book, they head straight home after dream catching. Once they're back in the cave, the BFG begins labeling all the dreams, and this is when he's describing the dreams to Sophie, and she can see them in the bottles. We see a little of this in the movie before they go dream catching, but this is another change that just really makes sense for the movie. I think it's more fun to see the dream as the boy having it rather than if they had just been in the cave talking about it. The bit about the BFG telling Sophie giants don't have parents also happens in the book, but it happens pretty early on when they first get to the cave and start talking. There's one small change in the scene where Sophie and the BFG have breakfast with the Queen. In the movie, after expressing his disgust with coffee, he pulls out a bottle of Frobscottle to share. A bunch of bagpipers come in and they all toast to the BFG and have a drink. Naturally, that's followed by a round of Whizzpoppers, including the Queen herself. In the book, the BFG doesn't have any Frobscottle with him, and Sophie is horrified when he tells the Queen it makes musical whiz-popping. Sophie quickly tells him the drink is forbidden, so he offers to do some whiz-popping without it. The Queen says music is good for the digestion, and she says she likes to have the bagpipers play while she dines in Scotland. So the BFG takes that as the green light and lets one rip. Afterwards, the Queen says she prefers the bagpipes, but she has a smile on her face. I like that the movie threw in the bagpipers for this scene as a nice little reference to the book here, and I really don't have any problems with this change because it's definitely funnier seeing a room full of people thrown around by the force of their farts. In the movie, the BFG uses a nightmare to distract the giants so the British army can capture them. Sophie is the one who ends up releasing it because the BFG forgot his dream horn at the palace. It doesn't go quite according to plan because the flesh lump eater avoids the nightmare, but it works out in the end. In the book, the BFG gives the nightmare to the flesh lump eater only, and he does this on the way back from Dream Country. The nightmare isn't a part of the capture plan at all. Instead, the army sneak up while the giants are sleeping and get them all hooked up to the helicopters. They manage to almost get everyone, but the flesh lump eater wakes up before they can tie him up. He quickly knocks over the BFG and he's about to eat a soldier when Sophie runs over and sticks him in the ankle with a brooch the Queen gave her. The flesh lump eater thinks he's been bitten by a viper, and the BFG seizes his opportunity and pretends to help, but ties him up instead, and the day is won. In the movie, the giants are carried away, left on an island, and given snozcumbers as their only food source. Sophie lives in the palace, and she narrates a dream that she had, in which she could see the BFG's cave from her window, with a whole new garden with lots of plants, as well as the book that he was writing about their adventure. She says they're both happy now, whispers a good morning to the BFG, who hears it all the way over in Giant Country. In the book, the giants are taken back to England and put into a pit 500 feet deep, the size of a football field, where they're kept as a tourist attraction. The BFG goes down and unties them and is airlifted out before the giants can harm him. The BFG also gives them the snozcumbers to eat, and he gives the royal gardeners the plants so they can continue to grow them to feed the giants. The BFG was given gifts from the rulers of all the countries as thanks for stopping the giants from eating all of their citizens. The Queen has a special house built for him in Windsor Great Park, along with a little cottage for Sophie next door, and she gives him the title of Royal Dream Blower. There's an incident at the Giant's Pit where three drunk guys climb the fence, fall in, and get eaten, but then they put up a sign and it's all right after that. Sophie tutors the BFG, and when he learns to write, she suggests he write a book about them, and it's revealed at the very end that this book was in fact written by the BFG himself. I really like this story and the things that we can learn from it. There's the understanding and empathy for being an outsider, for being brave, and for standing up for yourself. But I think what stood out for me the most when I was reading it this time around was our acceptance and understanding for people who don't have the same level of education as we might have. I love books like this with made up words and silly wordplay because it's a really great way to engage young readers and readers of any age, really. But I recently discovered how frustrating it can be for readers at a certain stage in their understanding of the English language. My daughter is a first grader, and so she's at the stage in her education where she's learning to read and spell, and she's learning the beginnings of the rules of grammar. Recently, she was reading a Junie B. Jones book to me, and she was getting frustrated with it because of the way the grammar was used. In this particular book, Junie B. is a kindergartner, and her grasp of grammar is still pretty loose. So she says things like realer and littler, and my daughter was having a hard time with this because she knew it wasn't the way you're supposed to say it. And so we talked about how Junie B. is still learning and she doesn't know the rules that my daughter already knows. So this use of language in children's books can be simultaneously fun, frustrating, and help build empathy, and it's not something I had really thought of before. In this book, Sophie learns that not everyone has the same educational experiences, and even though she's not trying to be mean by correcting the giant's grammar constantly, she finally understands how her behavior is hurtful to him. I like that the book gives the reader more to think about in terms of ethics when the BFG is discussing human behavior versus the behavior of the giants, and I wish some of that would have made it into the movie. Overall, despite some very big changes to the details of the story, I enjoyed this adaptation, and I definitely recommend reading and watching this story. Well, there you have it. That's my recap on the BFG, written by Roald Dahl in 1982, and the 2016 adaptation, directed by Stephen Speilberg. I've included links to both the book and the movie in the description below, so you can check them out for yourselves. If you enjoyed this review, please click like and be sure to click subscribe to see my next video. Thanks for watching.